Welcome back to Under the Silence. I'm Bianca Moeschinger. This is a space where silence is honoured. Not just the quiet around us, but the deeper stillness within us. Where feeling begins, truth lives, and healing finds its shape. Over the last few episodes, we've been in a conversation about faith. Not the kind found in doctrine or belief systems, but the kind that lives in the tissues of the body, the kind that emerges when the mind lets go and the breath returns. In From Silence to Trust, when the body says no and reparenting the self, we explored what it means to listen to our inner signals, to sit in the grey, to meet emotion without fixing, and to begin gently to trust again. Today we continue that journey, but we enter a new terrain. The quiet collapse. That moment when something inside us shifts, softly, sometimes invisibly, and we realize that a long-held story is finally ready to dissolve. This is the part of healing we don't talk about enough. The part that doesn't look powerful or polished, but it's here, in this surrender, that we meet the truth of who we are becoming. Let's begin. We've all had those moments where something inside us cracks, quietly. Not in a way the world might notice, but in a way that we do. It could be a single conversation, a wave of emotion we didn't expect, or just a lingering thought that something no longer feels true. It's as if a thread begins to loosen in our inner fabric. We might try to hold it together, to stay composed, to carry on, but deep down we know a shift has begun. And what if that shift isn't something going wrong? What if that's where healing starts? This podcast is a space where we slow down enough to feel, where silence isn't empty but full of things we haven't said, feelings we've tried to outrun, and stories we didn't know were shaping us. Have you ever had a moment, quiet, maybe unexpected, where something inside you shifted and you couldn't quite name what had changed, only that something had let go? Maybe it wasn't a big emotional release, maybe it didn't come with words or clarity or even relief. But something cracked, a wall softened, a pattern you'd been repeating for years suddenly didn't fit anymore. That's the moment we're talking about today. The moment when we know, the moment when what no longer serves us begins to dissolve without permission, without performance, and without fanfare. It's subtle, but it's real. And in the body, it feels like something loosening, something unhooking, something long held beginning to move. And it's often in that space, before we fully understand what's happening, that something sacred begins to reorganize. Following on from my last piece, From Silence to Trust, where I explored how faith lives inside the emotional body and becomes the quiet bridge between healing and becoming, I now find myself in a new awareness. Not just personal, but collective. Something is shifting in the field of consciousness itself. Faith is not a structure. It's not static. It evolves. It meets us where we are, and sometimes it breaks us open. We each hold a level of conscious awareness, a lived experience of truth, of devotion, of presence, and at various points in our lives, the stories we carry, some conscious, many unconscious, come to an edge, a moment where they can no longer be sustained in the body, where the emotional load becomes too heavy, the tension too thick, the chemistry too off balance. What happens in those moments is profound. A story dies, a belief loosens, a pattern finally cracks, and in that collapse something begins to move again. This is where faith reveals itself, not as a blind hope or bypassing optimism, but as a willingness to meet the discomfort, the disorder, the grief, to stay present with what is real even when it hurts. Because true healing doesn't emerge from avoidance. It rises when we choose presence over protection, when we choose breath over suppression, when we choose to meet the moment as it is rather than what we wish it to be. Faith walks us back to the body again and again. Healing is not just personal, it is ancestral, it is collective. It is the chemistry of the present interacting with the residue of the past and the potential of the future. This is where faith lives, not in belief alone, but in action, in willingness, in the ability to feel what was once frozen, to name what was once silence, to breathe where we once held our breath. This is not about religion, it's about resonance. It is about what becomes possible when we honor the invisible. Faith isn't a doctrine. It's an embodied relationship with what we cannot control. It is how we walk with the unknown. And in this season, we are being asked to walk differently, to meet what rises within us and around us with reverence, with curiosity, with breath. The stardust is here. It is not to be captured, it is to be met. Because when something passes, whether a person, a pattern, or a long-held belief, it creates space for something new. And in the body, when an unconscious or subconscious story that's been quietly shaping our chemistry dies, we don't just find relief, we find new possibility. This is the death that heals, the letting go that restores rhythm. In psychosomatic therapy, we witness this every day. The moment someone reaches into what has been held in the tissue, an old grief, a silenced truth, a suppressed memory, and instead of collapsing, they stay, they feel, they breathe, and through that breath, through that presence, something changes. This is not metaphorical, it is chemical. It is the nervous system repatterning. It is the cellular structure reorganizing. It is the sacred intelligence of the body returning to coherence. At a micro level, this is faith embodied, chemistry becoming motion, emotion becoming truth, and a human being becoming more of themselves than ever before, one sacred step at a time. Thank you for being here and for walking this path with me, even the quiet, uncertain parts. If today's episode invited something to soften or stirred something unspoken, let it move in its own time. This work is not linear, it's layered, cyclical, and deeply personal. You can explore more of my offerings at biancamoeschinger.com or join me in training, retreat, or session at psychosomaticsandemotionalanatomy.com. Under the Silence is available on Spotify and all major platforms, and I'd be honored if you shared this episode with someone who might need it. Until next time, walk gently, let what's ready to collapse, collapse, and trust what rises in its place. Ciao for now.